Tourist profiles: who is really going? Those who enter Afghanistan today as tourists are not drawn from the broad spectrum of casual holidaymakers. Instead, the majority belong to a few distinct groups, and their reasons for visiting are tied more to identity and intent than to beaches or relaxation. Official figures from the Taliban's National Statistics and Information Authority, NSIA, confirm that the flow is heavily male. One release covering a 3-month period in 2024 noted about 141 women among almost 2,900 foreign entrants, underscoring how small the female share remains. Within this overwhelmingly male majority, 4 principal visitor types stand out: adventure backpackers, online content creators, ex-service personnel, and geopolitical thrill seekers. Each approaches Afghanistan differently, but all share a willingness to navigate costs, restrictions, and risks that deter mainstream travelers. Adventure backpackers form the first and most visible category. These are individuals who already move at the edge of structured tourism, often traveling for months through the Middle East and Central Asia with light gear and improvised plans. When their routes bring them close to Afghanistan, some see entry as the ultimate challenge. They usually rely on local guest houses and transport arranged informally rather than formal hotel networks. The appeal comes not from comfort, but from being able to say they crossed Taliban checkpoints or explored city bazaars few outsiders see. Because rural travel can be more unpredictable, many of these backpackers pool funds to hire local armed drivers, sometimes paying several $100s a week. For them, the expense is part of proving resourcefulness. What emerges is less about sightseeing and more about endurance, adaptability, and bragging rights earned by surviving routes few attempt. The second group treats Afghanistan as both destination and workplace. Digital creators, YouTubers, Instagram vloggers, and TikTok documentarians enter largely to generate content that will stand out in crowded feeds. Clips of Kabul markets, the Bamiyan Valley, or mountain road trips provide striking visuals framed by tension. Their audiences reward them with attention, sponsorships, and growth precisely because of the risk implied. Content creators invest in appearances by calculating logistics carefully. Many contract trusted drivers equipped with weapons, paying between $500 and several $1,000s depending on the distance and security level required. The money is counted as part of their production cost, offset by the returns of online visibility. In doing so, they don't just record Afghanistan, they amplify its accessibility by normalizing journeys that followers might copy. Their videos often frame the country not as chaos, but as surprising discovery, reinforcing the idea that risk can be managed by the savvy rather than avoided outright. A smaller but notable portion of arrivals comes from ex-soldiers and veterans, largely from the United States, Britain, and Australia. For them, Afghanistan is not an abstract conflict zone but a place tied to personal service. Some return seeking closure or reconciliation, wanting to witness the country without weapons or combat gear, as civilians rather than occupiers. Others describe curiosity about areas they knew only through military deployments. Their previous exposure gives them confidence with local dynamics and reduces hesitation about security. They often engage local guides they might never have considered as soldiers, moving through sites once considered off-limits under patrol conditions. Numbers are smaller in this group, but their presence illustrates how Afghanistan has shifted in perception, from battle space to a kind of open-air archive revisited to find different meanings. Then there are those driven by what might be called geopolitical thrill. These individuals treat travel as a form of immersion in world affairs. Afghanistan stands on the same list that includes journeys to North Korea, parts of Syria, or Libya. Visitors pursue not comfort but the sense of proximity to contested terrain. For them, staging a photograph beside an abandoned Soviet tank or posting from the streets of Kabul carries significance among peers attuned to global conflict. They do not necessarily stay long or range far beyond visible sites, but their motive is distinct: to experience the atmosphere of a place where international politics remain raw. These visitors also tend to invest in security arrangements more consciously, sometimes arranging armored vehicles through agencies at costs in the thousands. The expenditure signals seriousness, adding to the aura of danger and prestige attached to such trips. Although women remain a minority among arrivals, their presence is striking. Foreign female tourists encounter fewer barriers than Afghan women, who face official bans from parks, gyms, and cultural venues. European or American women can enter spaces closed to locals, provided they respect dress codes and accept heightened attention. For the Taliban, permitting this dual standard demonstrates control. Outsiders are tolerated when closely managed, while for communities, it highlights inequality. Afghan women excluded from their own heritage sites may watch foreigners access them freely. Accounts from these visitors describe the contradiction directly: curiosity and hospitality on one hand, but palpable awareness of standing where local women cannot. All of these profiles reflect in daily interactions. Few outsiders blend easily into Afghan cities. Clothing, equipment, and cameras mark them instantly. Guides act as intermediaries, explaining rules and smoothing paperwork, while interpreters assist not only with culture but with ensuring creators can film without immediate interference. Transport follows routes adjusted for security, with armed escorts sometimes riding alongside visitors to rural valleys or monuments. At each level, money in dollars or euros changes hands directly. Car hires, guest houses, market stalls, and restaurants adapt to the niche, reshaping themselves around spending patterns of small but steady foreign groups. What results is not mass tourism, but a patchwork economy reliant on trickles of high-risk, high-paying clients. The narrowness of these domestic markets is important. Unlike stable destinations that diversify tourism across families, retirees, and package travelers, Afghanistan depends almost entirely on a few archetypes. Remove any of them if influencers deem the country too risky, or if backpackers decide to bypass checkpoints, and whole parts of the sector could collapse overnight. A single kidnapping, detention, or hostile incident could redefine perceptions across entire communities of travelers. The stability of Afghanistan as a niche tourism hub is tied precariously to choices made by a relatively small group of risk-tolerant people. Yet even within this fragility, adaptation deepens. Drivers accustomed to aid convoys now shift to transporting tourists. Guesthouse owners tweak services toward visitors with cameras and dollar bills. English terms are learned to facilitate quick exchanges. In the mountains, homestays once priced for locals now shift rates to match what foreigners expect to pay. The very act of accommodating these outsiders reshapes practices, not because the flow is large, but because each individual represents significant financial weight. The imbalance of privilege is perhaps the starkest element in these interactions. A female tourist is welcomed into monuments forbidden to Afghan women. An ex-soldier recontextualizes a landscape once marked by violence while locals live under deepening controls. Digital creators take home earnings from video platforms while Afghan users confront censored internet access. Each group of travelers benefits from flexibilities denied to Afghans themselves. The Taliban tolerate this contrast not from openness but from calculation, weighing revenue and image management against ideological consistency. Visitors operate in a space of exception, enjoying permissions that are simultaneously unavailable to citizens. By early 2025, these archetypes, backpackers, digital creators, ex-service veterans, and thrill-seekers, have become consistent enough to constitute a pattern, not a passing phase. Their arrivals, though modest in total numbers, carry outsized significance for both foreign perception and local income. They highlight a peculiar economy that grows from danger, recognition, and performance rather than typical recreation. Whether it continues depends less on national planning than on the continued desire of these individuals to pursue distinction abroad. The practical outcome is clear. Afghanistan receives tourists not seeking comfort, but experiences unmatched elsewhere. And once inside, these travelers encounter more than just a backdrop of checkpoints and guest houses. Their journeys unfold across terrain that often stuns with natural beauty, yet is tightly bounded by rules and restrictions. What they find is a constant negotiation between what Afghanistan reveals and what it denies. On the ground, between beauty and rules. Once in Afghanistan, travelers quickly notice that their experiences are framed not just by the country's vast beauty, but also by the rules that govern access to it. Across valleys, shores, and ancient cities, the striking landscapes are never far from reminders of control. The result is an environment where awe and restriction shape each moment side by side. Many foreigners describe the scenery itself as the core reason for visiting. In the highlands, jagged ranges rise into snow-topped peaks, while narrow valleys cut deep into the earth, carrying rivers past small farming villages. In Bamiyan province, the plateaus stretch for miles, opening views toward the Pamir Mountains and neighboring states. Bandi Amir's deep blue lakes, encircled by barren cliffs, appear in sharp contrast to the desert terrain that surrounds them. Elsewhere, remnants of centuries-old forts still stand over towns that once lay along key Silk Road routes. For visitors unaccustomed to such stark and uncommercialized settings, the impression is one of rare, almost untouched grandeur. Yet entry into these surroundings is never simple. The Taliban's rules apply everywhere, encoding limits into every step of the journey. One of the clearest examples lies in how parks and public spaces are divided between foreigners and Afghan women. Since 2023, Taliban decrees have barred Afghan women from visiting Band-e-Amir National Park and many other public parks, extending bans that cover places such as gyms and bathhouses. These restrictions remain in force and are widely enforced by local authorities. Foreign women, however, are treated under a separate standard. They must wear headscarves, but in many cities they are not pressed to adopt full body or face coverings. Guides regularly remind visitors of expected dress codes, and enforcement is visible but not absolute. What results is an asymmetry that shapes the tourist experience. Western women can walk freely along shores Afghan women cannot, able to take photographs in places where locals stand outside forbidden gates. Tourists often note the unease this generates, curiosity from onlookers paired with the quiet absence of Afghan women at the same sites. Religious and cultural landmarks show the same pattern. In Herat, the Friday Mosque with its pale blue tiles opens to groups of foreigners whose guides recount centuries of its preserved architecture. Tourists enter under supervision, watch caretakers at work, and walk across courtyards to photograph walls covered with patterns. But Afghan women remain excluded unless under rare, special permissions. Foreign men and women present for a day can move about more freely than citizens who live nearby. For locals, the mosque is part of life but bounded by strict rules. For tourists, it becomes an emblem of culture they can access without the same constraints. Everyday routines reinforce these contrasts. Foreigners are welcome in tea houses or open-air gardens that Afghan women are prohibited from entering. Travelers recount being seated in segregated spaces or invited into quarters where their presence bent the rules temporarily, while locals lived under restrictions that remained non-negotiable. The Taliban's treatment of guests often involves concessions that underline difference. Outsiders are entitled to exceptions, citizens are bound tightly to restrictions. For tourists, this can feel like privilege layered over an uncomfortable backdrop. Security checkpoints intensify this sense of being both received and restrained. Moving between cities, travelers are routinely stopped by Taliban officers who check documents, investigate itineraries, and ask questions about contacts. Reports describe inspections that range from brief exchanges to hour-long questioning sessions. On occasion, foreigners have been held in offices for background checks before being released. Some travelers have faced short detentions without clear explanations, only to be freed after local authorities gave approval. These inconsistent encounters create a tension. Hospitality exists alongside suspicion, and visitors come to expect that travel will include abrupt pauses under armed watch. For Afghans, these controls define ordinary movement. For outsiders, they are temporary disruptions but no less intimidating. Later in this video, we'll return to these checkpoints as part of a practical look at what visitors should expect and prepare for. The risks extend beyond these visible interactions. Afghanistan remains one of the most heavily mined countries in the world due to decades of war. Even scenic areas can harbor landmines or unexploded ordnance, particularly in rural parts far from Kabul. International monitors continue to warn that hikers straying from established tracks may unknowingly pass into dangerous ground. For tourists hiking to remote plateaus or exploring valleys, the potential danger underscores how beauty is never free of historical conflict. Access for foreign women continues to highlight contradictions. In Bamiyan, a woman arriving from Europe may be guided through valleys or up mountain paths once famous for their colossal statues, now empty niches in the rock. Afghan women, in contrast, remain barred from walking these same paths. Visitors often speak afterward about the discomfort of enjoying privileges that women of the country itself cannot. The sight of excluded locals becomes as memorable as the caves themselves, a quiet but persistent reminder of the unequal conditions that frame the trip. Male tourists face their own layers of control. They are expected to adopt conservative dress, avoid displays considered immodest, and remain cautious with cameras. Photographing markets may pass without comment, yet any attempt to film government buildings or security installations can trigger swift questioning. In Kabul's bazaars, the vibrancy of trade coexists with the presence of armed men and surveillance. In tea houses, tourists can enjoy open hospitality, but departure often leads directly back to checkpoints bristling with guards. The contradiction becomes routine, freedom to observe paired with constant observation in return. Even in widely promoted areas, visitors perceive the dual reality. In Bamiyan, the towering cliff niches once filled with the giant Buddhas stand as some of Afghanistan's most famous landmarks. Tourists view the scars of destruction, enter small museums to see fragments, and gaze out over valleys once celebrated by Silk Road travelers. Locals, however, live daily within rules that emphasize exclusion, not access. For Afghan women, beauty nearby is rendered unreachable. For tourists, the same places become highlights in itineraries. The disconnect is stark in every brochure photograph and every local conversation recalling history through a lens of loss. Some of the most striking impressions come from the coexistence of charm and surveillance. Visitors recount sunsets over mountain ridges, moments of silence in breathtaking valleys. At the same time, trucks of armed men park nearby or loudspeakers announce official restrictions. Market afternoons can include laughter of children alongside the visual reminders of police posted on every corner. For travelers who came in search of difference, the sense of duality, beauty framed by overt control, ends up shaping the deepest memories. Afghanistan succeeds in presenting rare and remarkable views, but those views are always conditioned by the absence or containment of others. Tourism in Afghanistan today cannot be separated from these overlapping realities. The landscapes remain spectacular and cultural legacies astonishing, yet entry into them is determined by rules drawn from the political order. Foreigners are permitted, even encouraged, to walk paths that locals cannot. Outsiders take photographs that citizens would hesitate to capture. The result is a form of travel that feels extraordinary less because of the scenery alone, but because of the tension woven into every scene. For visitors in 2025, that tension becomes the most memorable quality, seeing snow peaks rise above valleys, then noting how Afghan women must view them only from afar, sipping tea in a bazaar while aware that checkpoints wait on the road ahead. It produces experiences that linger in memory not only as beauty but as paradox. And while these impressions begin in landscapes and rulebooks, they extend beyond individual trips. They contribute images and narratives that circulate far outside Afghanistan, images that do not emerge accidentally, but within efforts to show the country in particular ways. Marketing a war-torn state. When people think of how Afghanistan is portrayed abroad, polished tourism advertising is rarely what comes to mind. Yet since 2022, the Taliban have been producing their own version of marketing, presenting a softer image of hospitality for outside audiences. Their Ministry of Information and Culture has released short videos showing mountain ranges, mosques, and smiling families. In some clips, officials explicitly welcome foreigners, framing the country as open to guests. These examples, while modest by global standards, demonstrate a clear shift. A regime once known for exclusion now seeks to attract outsiders. To extend this reach, the Taliban have also encouraged tourism-related coverage on social media. Ministry statements have praised vloggers who documented trips, and local officials have sometimes guided them directly to picturesque sites. Several background reports note that foreign influencers were invited to share experiences abroad as a way to counter travel warnings. These gestures show that the marketing effort is not accidental. Even without formal global recognition, Afghanistan's rulers have identified digital promotion as one of the few tools available to reshape opinion. Much of this involves controlling what visitors see. Rather than letting outsiders roam freely, the Taliban arrange curated programs for journalists, bloggers, and influencers. Groups are shown ancient mosques, bazaars, valleys, and cultural landmarks chosen for safety and vibrancy, while areas marked by repression or poverty remain off-limits. The strategy is not subtle, but it is effective. The curated access produces compelling images designed to dominate perception abroad. For audiences far from Kabul, these images can easily overshadow any knowledge of restrictions left unseen. We will look at what travelers are shown and what they are not as this narrative unfolds. Within these supervised environments, hospitality is elevated as the central theme. Visitors are encouraged to film tea ceremonies in courtyards, capture vendors laughing in bazaars, or take photographs of serene landscapes. These moments, selected and amplified, circulate widely, reinforcing the image of warmth and welcome. Strikingly absent are the scenes underlining the realities of repression. Afghan women blocked from public parks, police at checkpoints, or families struggling with poverty. Instead, the content suggests Afghanistan as a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered, a place that combines heritage and untouched scenery. The omissions are deliberate, and they reframe the environment into a story aligned with government interests. Influencers and travel vloggers often play a key role in this system, sometimes knowingly, sometimes by accident. Their drone shots of mountain valleys or walkthrough tour of bustling Kabul markets present striking, shareable content. In doing so, they provide the regime with what amounts to unpaid promotion. Neither sponsorships nor official scripts are necessary. A single upload showing foreigners moving comfortably along Afghan streets can counter the urgency of international warnings. A simple travel reel serves as powerful evidence of normality. This amplification is magnified by the structure of social media itself. A government press release declaring the country safe garners little attention, but a casual video by a Western traveler playing football with children in Bamiyan can reach millions. Because these videos appear personal and unfiltered, they hold more credibility with audiences than official statements ever could. Algorithms boost them quickly, and viewers interpret them not as propaganda but as lived experience. The harsh conditions that continue to define most Afghan lives rarely enter these frames, but in digital circulation, what remains invisible is easily ignored. Beyond individual creators, the Taliban also sponsor structured opportunities that ensure coverage spreads internationally. Media organizations, including small outlets, have been invited into the country under careful watch. Journalists are provided transport, guides, and activities meant to highlight culture and scenic beauty rather than repression. While critical reports still arise from these trips, the visuals, vistas, markets, and moments of quiet hospitality travel beyond the words attached to them. A photo gallery of travelers by blue lakes or a news clip showing a mosque courtyard inevitably reaches audiences that might otherwise view Afghanistan only through reports of conflict. It is crucial to recognize that this pattern is not traditional advertising. There are no major budgets, international ad agencies, or professionally shot commercials. Instead, Afghanistan's current rulers lean on low-cost digital promotion, online volunteers, and selective invitations. For a country under sanctions and largely abandoned by international finance, this improvised system functions as a substitute for official diplomacy. Tourism becomes a proxy channel of engagement, with foreign travelers acting as informal envoys, whether they intend to or not. By turning hospitality into a visual theme, the Taliban gains soft power even without recognition. Footage of groups being welcomed with tea or guided through markets becomes a political message as much as a travel memory. The fact that Afghan women remain excluded from many of those same places rarely imprints itself on these depictions. The controlled nature of access ensures that what gets uploaded reflects calmness, tradition, and beauty, not restriction or surveillance. Once these images circulate abroad, the filtering process behind them is rarely scrutinized. In contrast to the limited power of official proclamations, a traveler's casual footage carries far more persuasive weight. A statement from Kabul insisting on security is easily dismissed. A video of a European tourist wandering safely through Herat appears authentic, regardless of the unseen escort outside the frame. The regime calculates this difference and exploits it. Letting foreigners film traditional hospitality costs nothing and produces a stream of content that doubles as public relations. Each upload functions as indirect endorsement of stability, exactly the impression international governments wish to counter. This approach produces a striking duality. On one channel, international media continue to report on bombings, repression, and women's exclusion from schools and work. On another, platforms like Instagram and TikTok fill with travel logs portraying quiet streets, scenic hikes, and friendly conversations. The coexistence of these divergent narratives creates confusion. For the Taliban, confusion is useful. If prospective travelers doubt the absolute warnings of their governments after seeing apparently safe footage, they are more likely to test the reality themselves. Increased arrivals, in turn, generate fresh footage and the cycle repeats. Some Afghan voices and outside commentators have criticized these campaigns directly, describing them as attempts to whitewash ongoing human rights violations. They call attention to the gap between polished images marketed abroad and the daily repression experienced by citizens, particularly Afghan women excluded from public life. This ethical critique reminds outsiders that positive tourism narratives do not exist in a vacuum, but sit alongside systemic violations. The broader effects of this marketing extend beyond tourism revenue. Each social media clip showing foreigners traveling safely implies that the Taliban govern effectively, even if the underlying social order is marked by exclusion and restriction. Every new tourist indirectly affirms that the state has control over its territory. Without direct recognition from major governments, these impressions create a different form of legitimacy, a kind that derives not from diplomatic agreements, but from the perception of normality. For the Taliban, tourism thus represents both economic relief and strategic narrative. Marketing the country through influencers and tour provides dollars, but it also provides credibility. Turnout in the thousands demonstrates practical functioning. Uploads from foreign guests replace formal spokespeople. The result is an improvised but effective campaign that reframes Afghanistan abroad, even if only partially and selectively. Yet this carefully staged picture rests on fragile ground. The reliance on curated narratives and influencer content can obscure realities only so long as nothing intrudes violently on the illusion. Incidents that cut against the marketed story can reach audiences just as quickly as staged images. And in Afghanistan, those incidents remain a constant risk, waiting to test the strength of this constructed narrative. The shadow of ISIS-K and security risks. For all the energy the Taliban invest in presenting Afghanistan as a country of open landscapes and hospitality, a different force continues to undermine that effort. Active within Afghanistan's borders but outside Taliban control is ISIS-Khorasan, known as ISIS-K. This group functions as a persistent insurgent adversary committed to destabilization and exploitation of violence. Where the Taliban seek to portray a version of order, ISIS-K thrives on disruption. Their attacks strike at civilians, Taliban forces, and increasingly at the foreigners who now choose to visit. In the eyes of ISIS-K, a handful of outsiders wandering across valleys or historic sites are not harmless tourists, but high-value targets capable of amplifying their message far beyond Afghanistan's borders. The most visible and devastating example of this tension came in May 2024, when gunmen associated with ISIS-K opened fire on a group of Spanish visitors near Bamiyan, a location long promoted as Afghanistan's cultural showpiece. 3 Spanish tourists and 1 Afghan lost their lives, while several others were seriously wounded. That single attack fundamentally changed how tourism in Afghanistan is perceived. Bamiyan had been marketed as one of the nation's safest destinations. Its heritage and stunning natural surroundings were intended to symbolize Afghanistan's readiness for cautious re-engagement with foreigners. Instead, the killings demonstrated how fragile those assurances were. A site once seen as proof of security became a showcase of insecurity. This was not an isolated event. Accounts from recent years describe kidnappings of foreigners, sometimes resolved quickly, sometimes resolved only after lengthy negotiations. Motivations vary. In some cases, ransom proves the goal, in others it is the propaganda value of detaining outsiders in contested space. For ISIS-K, the calculation is straightforward. Attacking or capturing a foreign traveler produces international headlines immediately, magnifying their presence on the global stage. Each incident, regardless of the number of victims, undermines Taliban claims of protection. The Taliban may present themselves as guardians of stability, but every successful strike by ISIS-K illustrates that their reach is incomplete. Even with these risks on record, tourists keep entering the country. Many approach danger in mathematical terms, assuming that the chance of being caught in an attack is statistically low compared with the larger number of visitors who leave safely. They also rely on the presence of guides who have connections to Taliban officials, with the belief that such links lower exposure to harm. Some argue that ISIS-K's operations are concentrated in particular hotspots, meaning that avoidance of these areas makes travel manageable. Yet such reasoning faces an obvious challenge. ISIS-K thrives on unpredictability. Attack location and timing are rarely signaled in advance. To assume patterns of safety carries as much risk as venturing without precautions at all. For tour operators, managing these risks is central to their survival. They respond with practical measures rather than elaborate guarantees. Routes are revised regularly to steer clear of recent attack sites. Curfews are common, forcing travelers to remain indoors after dark. Tourists are urged to dress modestly and avoid displays of wealth or technology that might single them out for attention. Guides communicate constantly with local Taliban officials about road status and checkpoint security. Still, the process is shaped by an unspoken contradiction. Protection exists, but it is never absolute. A Taliban checkpoint may offer reassurance in one place, while in another, militants are preparing an ambush. The oscillation between perceived calm and ever-possible danger is what defines most visitors' accounts of movement through Afghanistan. Many visitors adopt additional layers of defense by hiring armed drivers or escorts. Local drivers with weapons can be contracted for a few $100s per week, a cost considered reasonable among young backpackers or digital creators who prioritize flexibility. For higher-end arrangements, including multiple armed guards or armored vehicles brought from Kabul, prices rise into the thousands of dollars each week, an expense shouldered typically by media teams or wealthier travelers. These arrangements reveal both the lure and fragility of Afghan tourism. Outsiders are aware enough of dangers to pay heavily for defense, yet the very need for such measures confirms that security depends on constant negotiation rather than certainty. ISIS-K's capacity, while hard to measure numerically, is substantial enough to shape the country's overall risk environment. Their attacks have struck not only foreign visitors, but also large civilian gatherings, religious events, and educational institutions. This breadth demonstrates a willingness to hit unexpected targets, undermining any blanket claim of safety. For tourists, this reality matters even more than isolated examples. Walking through a crowded bazaar or watching a festival performance can feel like a privileged cultural experience, but the background awareness that public spaces have been attacked in the past introduces a constant unease. Conversations with guides and the sight of surveillance at mosques or markets remind travelers of why protocols exist. The threat is not hypothetical, it is grounded in repeated acts of violence. The Taliban's broader image campaign is inevitably weakened whenever ISIS-K strikes foreign guests. Tourism is designed to show that Taliban governance equals security. Each foreign death or kidnapping alters the script. It reinforces to international audiences that control is contested, that authority has limits, and that visitors remain exposed. Western governments treat every incident as reinforcement of their maximum-level advisories. That dynamic intensifies isolation rather than reduces it, undoing much of the public relations effort invested in attracting visitors. For ISIS-K, undermining tourism also delivers key strategic returns. Striking foreigners damages Taliban credibility, killing or kidnapping them pressures foreign governments, halting tourist arrivals cuts short potential financial inflows that might otherwise stabilize local communities. In this sense, tourism has become one of several battlefronts in Afghanistan's ongoing conflict, a stage where authority and opposition perform before global audiences. Tourists, willingly or not, become central figures within that performance, used by state and insurgent actors alike to prove contrasting points. Yet against this backdrop, a segment of travelers continues to accept the gamble. These visitors often describe themselves as risk-tolerant by nature. They want the rare and the forbidden, and exposure to uncertainty becomes a critical part of the narrative they take home. The memory of Bamiyan 2024 lingers, but future visitors rationalize it as an aberration. Each journey completed without incident becomes testimony that such attacks, though tragic, are statistically rare. Uploaded videos and public accounts multiply this perception, pulling in new rounds of visitors who view danger less as deterrent and more as confirmation of authenticity. Still, the paradox is obvious. Every outsider who enters Afghanistan delivers, spending power in dollars or euros, benefits that ripple down to hotel managers, drivers, guides, and restaurant owners. These same arrivals simultaneously create targets that militants can exploit for symbolic and strategic gain. Travelers stand out in ways locals never do, moving in advertised patterns that make them easier to follow. The absence of broader tourist diversity magnifies that visibility. A handful of foreigners in any town becomes news in itself. From a militant perspective, that visibility is opportunity. This tension between economic benefit and constant vulnerability defines the character of Afghanistan's tourism environment. The Taliban keep promoting growth, pointing to steady numbers as proof of relative control. ISIS-K, meanwhile, treats the exact same visitor flow as an arena for disruption. The competition is not just about physical security, but about reputation. Every attack has significance far beyond its immediate location, while every safe journey is broadcast to counter it. Tourists move along circuits where competing narratives are tested in real time, each new arrival adding another layer to the struggle over perception. For outsiders deciding whether to come, this is the environment to weigh. Some choose to stay away entirely, guided by governmental warnings. Others calculate the odds differently and prepare accordingly, hiring escorts, limiting routes, and accepting costs as part of their experience. Regardless of strategy, all visitors navigate a landscape where beauty and fragility are deeply entangled with violence. And while this contest over safety dominates headlines, the impact inside Afghanistan is not limited to clashes between insurgents and government patrols. The flow of foreigners into the country also shapes the economic and social fabric of communities that receive them. The consequences of this presence, and who actually benefits from the money they bring, introduce another layer of complexity that demands attention. Economy versus exclusion. Tourism's recent rise in Afghanistan is inseparable from the communities now shaped by it.